Welcome to PCMC. I'm Mike Bongiorno. I'm joined today by my good friend and yours, Mr. Pete Marsh. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great.
Today we are talking about a film that is near and dear to my heart, and I think maybe your heart too. Masters of the Universe from 1987, produced by Canon, the A24 of its time.
Oh yeah. Globus and Gorham, right? Those two
Gollum.
guys. Yeah, yeah. Have you ever watched that documentary about Canon?
Yeah, Electric Boogaloo. I have.
Oh, I love that documentary.
There's a great anecdote from that documentary about this film where supposedly Sylvester Stallone visited the set of Masters of the Universe
Hmm.
and he saw Dolph Lundgren playing He-Man, and Dolph Lundgren had played the villain in Rocky 4, and he saw him talking and he was like, "Oh man, you gave that guy dialogue?" Dolph Lundgren
Yeah.
is struggling to not sound Swedish throughout this movie.
Yeah. This movie, it's funny because like there's so many like legends about this movie, and they talk about it in that documentary. And one of them is about how they were going to dub Dolph Lundgren and they were going to use some other actor's voice. I think they ended up dubbing it with his own voice afterwards to make it sound clearer. But
Yeah,
it's just so funny because he's such a smart person. He's got like PhDs and stuff like that.
yeah,
And
like
I think he's,
chemistry.
yeah, and I think he's very charismatic in general. But everyone always talks about how like, he struggled to play He-Man. And I don't know. I think he's likable. I like him in this movie.
Well, I cannot divorce my. This is one of those films where my critical adult, cinematic brain really has a hard time divorcing itself from my child brain.
Yep.
But I could say that I did not notice that as a kid. I never noticed that there was something weird about his voice. I mean, he doesn't speak a lot. He doesn't have a lot of dialogue.
No.
But it's not like I totally as a kid was like, oh, he's got a weird voice. Because I also remember him as the Punisher. And I never had a problem with that movie either.
Hmm. Yeah, this movie, it's crazy. It's so funny that you and I met in college because I think about my philosophy classes, and I know there's some kind of philosophical argument where like something could be two opposite things at the same time. Like it could be like in the box and outside of the box. This movie is like simultaneously a bad movie and a great movie at the same time, you know?
Yes, I agree.
Well, I don't think that necessarily it's all nostalgia either. When I watch this
Yes.
movie, I'm like, okay, essentially, if you had like a scale, it has these negative points that you could, as a critic, you could point out and have issues with, but then it also has these like strong qualities that as a critic you could be like, yeah, but it has
Yeah.
this too,
Yeah.
you know,
I
you know?
agree. If I did see this now for the first time, I wouldn't think it's spectacular, but I would think it's charming.
Right.
Yesterday, I was watching it for the 1 millionth time, and it occurred to me that the closest movie that I could think of like this
Hmm.
is the Flash Gordon,
Hmm.
because it's got really outlandish production design and a really really great actor playing the villain and like really playing it up. But the difference is, I think Flash Gordon really drags in the middle, whereas this movie really goes. This movie
Hmm.
is tight. Like if you just look at it in terms of plotting, it's like boom, 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 boom. Everything gets you to the next thing. Everything's moving fast. There's no fat on the bone, really. It's not a boring movie.
No, no, I think that Flash comparison is great because, like, probably the thing that stands out the most about Flash Gordon is the score by Queen. There's so many
Yes.
different parts in Flash Gordon that you remember and think about, but it's that Queen score. And then this movie has this really, really strong score, which I'm sure we're gonna like make fun of in a second and be like, oh, well, it's just like, Superman and Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
But it's like you feel it when Skeletor walks into that throne room, and like Skeletor has an exact theme. He-Man's got a theme. There's a theme that's connected to the key itself,
And
and
the two
like,
young kids, the two human teenagers, they have a theme.
yeah, yeah, and that's something that is like sadly missing from modern movies, where there's not like a specific theme for a character. It's like something that when we were growing up, movies were just filled with. And it teaches you like emotionally, okay, this is how you're supposed to feel in this moment. And like this movie, all the themes are really great. Like Skeletor's theme is really great. It conveys a certain kind of emotion. The He-Man theme is really great. You
Yeah.
know, I think like that's a really great plus for this movie.
Yeah. I think movies right now are in a place where they're using the score more as a sort of uh, an aesthetic or a vibe. Like a lot of people don't like this movie, but the Justice League, not the Schneider version, the original, the version that came out in theaters, that was scored by Danny Elfman,
Right.
and he used some of his Batman theme in that movie from the
Hmm.
1989 movie. And there's a reviewer that was like, you use a little bit of John Williams Superman theme and use a little bit of the Batman theme, and he's like, yeah, because it's important. And so they said like, what Batman theme did you use? And he was like, what do you mean, what Batman theme? There's only ever been one Batman theme, and it's the one I made. True,
Hmm.
like the Dark Knight doesn't have a theme for Batman really. There's the dun dun dun, but that's not assigned to any character. That's just reacting to something happening in the narrative.
Yes. I'm so glad that you brought up Zack Snyder in particular because I know that Zack Snyder has gotten in trouble for essentially taking themes from movies and then like reworking them and putting them onto his movies. Like there's that movie Titus, I think it's called, with like Anthony Hopkins,
Mm-hmm.
and he uses that music almost like exactly in 300, right? So I
Really?
think that yeah, I think what happens when they make movies nowadays is they'll say, okay, use this theme from this movie, and we're going to use it as like a placeholder for our music. And often they like are just slightly changing the music for their own movie, you know? And it just kind of shows that there isn't that kind of John Williams, that James Horner, there isn't that kind of person that's making these specific themes for these characters in movies these days, you
Yeah.
know?
The score to Masters of the Universe is by Bill Conti, who did a lot of things, but probably his biggest thing was Rocky, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Rocky theme
Mm-hmm.
is like iconic, right? One of the most iconic themes in movies.
Absolutely.
It's interesting when you look at this cast and crew, like a lot of these are really skilled people.
Oh yeah.
I want to talk
The
about I want to go everyone who worked on this movie. We did I did make the decision that I'm not going to mention the director of this film because the director of this film is a terrible person. And I'm not trying to ignore him, but I feel like he doesn't deserve to have his name spoken in the hallowed halls of PCMC.
yes.
But it also gives us an opportunity to look at other people because, and I'm guilty of this too. Quite often, people assign every artistic choice to the director. Oh, did you see what the
Mhm.
director did with that? The director did that. And the people that work hard and making really important decisions that become unsung are costume designers and production designers and editors and all these people. Master of the Universe. This film was written by David Odell.
Mhm.
There was a rewrite by Stephen Tolkien and a third person.
Mhm.
Produced by Cannon.
Mhm.
The composer was Bill Conti, as we just said. The
Mhm.
cinematographer was Hania Bear, who did a bunch of stuff. Ernest Scared Stupid is another one of hers that I like.
A
But
masterpiece.
yeah, but this is really great. It's edited by Ann V. Coates, who did Out of Sight and Eric Brockovich and a lot of good stuff. The production designer was William Stout, who worked on a lot of cool things in a lot of interesting capacities. But
Mhm.
even he will be open about he hired Mobius to work with him, and Mobius um created the updated character design of He-Man and Skeletor and or maybe not Skeletor, but the He-Man and the Sorceress and She-Ra. There's a She-Ra that was originally designed that ended up not being in this movie. Look up Mobius She-Ra, and
Oh my God.
it's like I want the multiverse where I could see the
Yeah.
Mobius She-Ra. Yeah, Mobius, because I think the designs of He-Man and all of them, the updated designs, I think are very cool. And
Hmm.
once you hear like, oh, it's Mobius, it's like, oh yeah, of course, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I hear Hodorowski's voice going, Mobius.
Right, right. Oh my God, that is so cool that you brought up Hodorowski too, right? Because isn't there like a part in Hodorowski's Dune where they like cite this movie too? Like,
Yes.
don't they say that this is like an influence, or I'm sorry, that his Dune was an influence on this?
Yeah, I mean, in that movie, they talk about one of the really flawed things that he did was when he was creating his Dune, he created like a Bible of all of his script and the production notes and like basically like a blueprint of the whole movie. And he thought it would be a good idea to send it out to all the major studios.
Yeah,
Like that would like entice them to want to work with him, which didn't happen. But uh the belief is that for like decades to come, they were mining this material for their movies, and they show like Alien and Masters Universe and even some of the later Star Wars, and it's like yeah, like there's definitely like some of Hodorowski's Dune in the production design of this movie.
oh man, we are such fucking nerds where we're quoting Hodorowski's Dune while we're talking about Masters of the Universe,
Yeah,
right?
a
Yeah,
movie that
no,
doesn't exist.
right, right. But it doesn't exist, but yet somehow it is like the beginning of so many movies too. Yeah, like even like fucking like Terminator, the original Terminator, there's like
Yes.
his vision in it is like kind of based on this hunter seeker vision in Hodorowski's Dune. Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, like you got to think about that throne room, which they use like over and over and again in this movie, right? Like
Which
that's
Mobius worked
so
on that throne room.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, yeah. I mean that is so like evocative of the like the Emperor in Dune and like his throne room and like
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like yeah, I mean I'm glad that we're not talking about the director. We're not giving him the attention that he deserves. But we should talk about influences, which I think that like this particular influence comes from him. But
Yes.
there is the big thing where they compare this movie to Jack Kirby's The Fourth World, which is like a part of DC Comics and their lore.
Uh-huh.
They compare like Skeletor to Darkseid. They compare Gwildor to this guy Metron. Like for your friends that aren't or listeners or whatever that aren't like diehard crazy comic book people, Metron's this guy that like floats around in a chair and he's kind of like neutral in
Uh-huh.
all the sort of big DC events. But the old gods are kind of like a big part of the mythology of DC Comics. And John Byrne, who's a comic book artist and writer, said that like Masters of the Universe 1987 is like the closest thing to a old gods or they call it fourth world movie. Have you ever heard about that?
No, no, I'm not familiar. I'm familiar with Darkseid, but I'm not familiar with that stuff, that material.
Yeah, yeah. It's like classic like good versus evil stuff, but it's like Jack Kirby just off a leash and unleashed or
Yeah.
whatever. And you have like Apocalypse, which is the planet of the bad guys, and you have Darkseid as the ruler there. Then you have New Genesis, which is like the good guys, and you have High Father, which is like the good guy there, the leader. And he has a son named Orion, that's like his adoptive son, and there's a guy named Mr. Miracle, who's a big DC character who's from
Um,
there. But one person pointed out that like Masters of the Universe isn't a one-to-one comparison between the two. It's just like really inspired by
right.
Jack Kirby's Fourth World stuff. And I've heard someone else say that like it might be the director saying that like this movie was inspired by that stuff, but it was also inspired by like the Fantastic Four kind of Doctor Doom epics. And then it was also inspired by like old Thor comics. So it's very inspired by comic books.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at like it's interesting because there's an evolution from the animated series to this, right? Whereas
Hmm.
the animated series is a fascinating blend between sort of sword and sandal fantasy
Hmm.
and kind of um I'm not sure space opera sci-fi, like kind of Star
Hmm.
Wars sci-fi, right? Like there's a king and queen, and then they're wearing loincloths, and there's a sort of desolate wasteland, but then there's also like spaceships and things like that.
Hmm.
In the film, you still have that interesting juxtaposition of fantasy and sci-fi, but I think it's slightly different. I think you've got more cyberpunk kind of sci-fi happening,
Mm.
and I think Mobius brought some of that. And in terms of fantasy, um, this occurred to me yesterday. I wrote it down. In terms of fantasy, it's not really sword and sandal. It's more like hmm,
Like
I
high fantasy?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like Lord of the Rings type stuff. Like,
yes, yes, yes.
yeah. Well,
I
well,
mean,
because
Gwildor's a
okay.
hobbit. He lives in a hobbit hole. He lives in like a hobbit hole that they put sci-fi stuff in.
Right. You know, like you bring up Gwildor and like the fact that he's like this little kind of cute fantasy creature, but on the good guy side, there really isn't any kind of magical fantasy stuff. They're just kind of like these warriors. I'm talking about in the movie. They're just
Yeah,
kind of like these warriors in this like resistance. Whereas like the real magic stuff is the bad guy stuff, right? Because like
right.
Skeletor, obviously, like he shoots lightning out of his hand. Evelyn pretends to be Courtney Cox's mom at one point.
Yeah,
The whole idea of like that Skeletor is going to take the sorceress's power or the power of Grayskull by the next moon, like that's all fantasy stuff, but it's really on the
yeah,
bad guy side. Like I think one of the notorious things about this movie is that, and I'm sure I'm kind of beating you to the punch here, but like there's no Prince Adam, right? So it's
hmm,
not like He-Man raises up the sword or Prince Adam raises up the sword and becomes He-Man. There's nothing
yeah,
like that. He's just He-Man the whole time. And even when he pulls out the sword, it really is just to be like, see, this is He-Man, like we're doing the thing, but there's
right,
no like reason why like the sword does anything for him.
right. The sword is not a magical totem in this. It's not until the very end of the movie when Skeletor takes his sword that
Mm-hmm.
they assign any importance to it.
Right.
It's not the MacGuffin. I mean, the key is the MacGuffin.
Right.
But the key is very magical because Gwildor says to the Kevin character, the Earth character, he says the existence is music, the universe is music. So the key is almost like a TARDIS, and you can travel in time and space as long as you know the right notes to play on the cosmic key.
Yeah.
And by
Yeah.
the way, talk about production design. I love the Cosmic Key. I've always loved the Cosmic Key. I would love to get a tattoo of the Cosmic Key. It's such a cool looking thing. I love the way it's the music it makes. I love the projection that comes on the top of the key and the things that move.
Yeah.
I think the production design in this movie is absolutely awesome and incredible.
Yes, yeah. Let's talk about the Cosmic Key for a second because it has that kind of synthesizer sound to it when it's playing, like and when it's activated, it's a and then it's like bow, that
Yeah,
synthesizer noise. They even like Kevin kind of compares it to like a Japanese synthesizer at one point
yeah,
when he discovers it. But there's something about the power in just those notes when it's like that synthesizer noise where it's like bow, like you
yes,
feel the
yes,
magic just from this sound that's essentially coming from a keyboard off
yeah,
screen, right? But I want to talk about that Masters of the Universe cartoon and magic and stuff like that because I think that's a really good point. It's a really good thing to kind of discuss in this movie. Because one thing I totally forgot to mention when I was comparing this all that Jack Kirby stuff is that all the people from New Genesis and Apocalypse, all that DC mythology shit, they use these things called boom tubes, and they're
hmm,
even in that fucking uh, Zack Snyder Justice League movie too. Boom tubes are basically like these like portable devices that like can give you answers to any questions that you have. They might maybe can like shoot blasts and stuff, but the main thing that the boom tube does is it opens up a portal
uh-huh,
between one world and another, so you can just walk through from one world to another, and that's what the cosmic key is, right? It's just
yeah,
like a boom tube, right? It opens up this doorway and you can go
wow,
from
yeah,
eternity to
yeah,
earth. Now this movie, what's so interesting about this movie and canon in general is that they're notorious for like burning through money and not having enough money to make their movies. And so that's why you have this movie that's like this like suburban He-Man with
right,
desolate streets where they film everything. And then you have all this money spent on this throne room. But like with fantasy movies in general, especially in the 80s, it's so common for like a character to go from this like fantasy world setting to the real world setting,
yeah,
right? And it is like a cost effective thing. But like this movie, I think is maybe like the biggest example of that. Can you think of a bigger example than that?
No.
Yeah,
Um, but yes, absolutely, that's what happens. But again, I to defend this, and I'm not defending it because you're not criticizing it, but
right.
to argue why I think this movie really works is I think they use of all the canon movies, except for like the fight at the very end, they use their money right. They put it in the right places. You begin in Eternia and you end in Eternia, which is smart. And I would even say, when you get to Earth, I think they do a good job not matching the fantasy of Eternia, but creating interesting looking spaces. Like you've got the fried chicken place that she works where they just like cowgirls. You've got a cemetery. You've got a high school prom where it's all like made up like a prom and really interesting looking. Now a lot of it's empty because they didn't have really any extras, but that adds an uncanny feeling to it.
Mm-hmm.
The music shop, Charlie's music shop, I think is very interesting. There's a whole siege battle in that shop. Um, Behind the school, I guess is like I don't know what, like a weird like gated off area with like shipping, fucking like with like boxes and stuff. A lot of that is lit with neon signs and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
wet streets, which is like something they do for lighting. I feel like they actually do a really good job, even like when they're in her house, right? And she's getting ready to move. She's moving from California to New Jersey. What a downgrade. She's like, I'm leaving California to start a new life in New Jersey. But her house, which is probably the most like domestic space, is filled with boxes, moving boxes. So even that
Mm-hmm.
is made odd in a way. They do a
Mm.
good job making the mundane interesting and
Mm-hmm.
combining uh, um the mundane with the fantastical. Like at some point, Gwildor gets them a pink Cadillac and like fixes it up Doc Brown style and like makes it like somehow run on some kind of crazy sci-fi shit. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
they drive around in. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's really smart because it's not a sci-fi vehicle, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
taking a real world car that's iconic, a pink Cadillac that's a convertible, and just sci-fiing it up a little bit, but it's still interesting to look at.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a really great path you got going on here because, like, it does make the movie feel unique and different. Like, the empty streets and stuff, because they didn't have extras, it reminds me of, like, Night of the Comet, like where all the
Yes.
people are missing, right? It has this kind of almost like post-apocalyptic feel, but it's got that 80s, like, we're having an apocalyptic event, but we're in like a suburban town. So it
Yes.
feels like desolate and empty, but it's really just because they didn't have people. And I think that like if they did have a lot of extras and you did have like He-Man and Tila and Man at Arms like interacting with a lot of different people, it would feel more hokey and stuff. And
Yes, I
like
agree.
um Courtney Cox, Julie and Kevin, that they do have their moments of like, what is going on, or like this looks weird, and then you have like Lubick who's like, what the hell is this? They both have the same reaction to like when they see Gwildor, they're like, what the hell is that when they see
Yeah.
him, right? But it's like they quickly take on the story of Eternia. Like it's not like there's multiple scenes where there's other people that meet them and they're like, this is so weird, or like, look at this guy walking around in a loincloth. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't have that fish out of water stuff as much when it comes to the humans reacting to Eternians, you know?
Yes, yes. No, yeah, I agree. There's really one corny part where there's a bunch of monsters in like um in a high school kitchen where like those big industrial like um fridges and stuff, and it's just like this looks weird. And then the janitor's like, you kids can't be in here, which is like,
Uh,
those look like kids to you? Those are,
yeah, yeah,
and then they
yeah. The
beat the shit out of them.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah. And I really want to talk about the monsters, the mercenaries in 1 second. But before we get to that, I just want to do one more thing about influences. Um, like I said before, they mentioned Thor being an influence for this movie, right? The
Yeah.
Thor comics. And I think it's like there's the inverse, right? I feel like this movie is a big inspiration on the Thor movie. Have you seen the original Thor
Yes,
movie?
yes, I agree.
Well,
Yeah,
because just like I mean, because this is always the thing with comics and fantasy and stuff like that, is that you always have to have this device that connects the fantasy world, the high fantasy world, to the regular world, so
yeah,
people can and right. And so, like with the fourth world stuff, it's boom tubes. With Asgard and Thor, it's like the Rainbow Bridge, right? That they
yes, yes,
use
yeah,
to
yeah,
get
yeah.
to Earth, and it's the same thing with this fucking movie where they have the cosmic key, and so like in comics and stuff, it's the idea of, well, we need to have like the relatable scenario. We need to have the scenario where like regular normie people can get into this weird shit, right?
Yeah,
But I think that in this movie, it is that, but it's also like we just don't have enough money to do Eternia stuff, so we have to kind
sure,
of
yeah.
make it suburban.
I
Yeah.
haven't, I haven't seen every single canon film. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen a lot of them. I'm sure you have too. I think
Mm-hmm.
this is, of what I've seen, this is the most competent canon film. It really
Mm-hmm.
is. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
look at like the other side of the spectrum would be Superman 4, which really you could just feel it has none of the magic of a Superman movie. It just feels so cheap. It feels the money's never spent in the right place. It's choppy, it's horrible. This is at least I think competent.
Yeah.
I think, I really think the movie, and this, we should say this movie did fail. I think the reason the movie failed was because, He-Man was on its way out. See, like Mattel, this toy company, their two big things were sorry, not She-Ra, were Barbie and He-Man. And Barbie was a sort of constant success, whereas He-Man was a sort of like a huge peak that like they completely like they had no idea it was going to be that huge and it like took over the world and then a decline. And by 1987 when this movie comes out, it's already on, there are no new episodes being made, right? There's only, I mean, it's a syndicated show, so there's only one technical season of He-Man.
Mm-hmm.
um so there's no new episodes being made. There's toys still being made, but the sales are not doing as well as they were, in like 85. It was
Right.
huge. I don't want to say splash in the pan because that makes it sound like it didn't have value, but it kind of took everything by storm and then kind of like faded away. And this was already the downslope. Like when the
Mm-hmm.
trailers came out, people were like, oh, wow, okay. Remember like when, like three years ago or like 4 years ago, there was an Angry Birds movie
Right,
and everyone was
right.
like, "What is this? 2007? Like, way to be way too late on the fucking bandwagon." That's how people felt with Master Universe. Like, oh, a He-Man movie now? Like,
Yeah.
but I think the movie itself, I think, is actually has an inherent value.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I think the world was just kind of like, probably kids had moved on. They were
Mm-hmm.
now interested in like, GI Joe or other things and Transformers or something.
Hell
Uh,
yeah.
it's something I want to. We're all over the place, which is fine because we have a lot of feelings about this movie. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't want to leave something out, which is I want to talk about the very opening because
Sure.
I've always thought the very opening is actually really effective and iconic.
Hell yeah.
You hear like a boom, and we see a shot, which is a matte painting of Grayskull, which again,
Right.
it doesn't. I love this Grayskull. It doesn't look like the Grayskull of the cartoon,
Right.
which is like a stone kind of like castle. This looks very cyberpunk and sci-fi, but still has a skull image of it. And there's this narrator who says, "At the center of the universe, at the border between the light and the dark, stands Castle Grayskull. For countless ages, the sorcerers of Grayskull has kept this universe in harmony, but the armies of darkness do not rest, and the capture of Grayskull is evermost in their minds. For those that control Grayskull will come the power to be supreme, the power to be almighty, the power to be masters of the universe." And then the Bill Conti bump,
Right, right, right.
and
Yeah.
you just talked about the bridge in Thor. When the title comes up, Masters of the Universe, it's the same like design or font, I guess, or whatever of that's been on the toys, Masters of the Universe. But instead
Yes.
of the color that you're used to, it's got this very bright, like iridescent color behind it, like pinks and blues, and that
Yeah.
reminds me of the bridge in Thor.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, there you go. I mean, there's that inspiration right there, you know. Like I said, the three big inspirations were the Fourth World stuff, Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom, and then Thor. And yeah, yeah, that's a big thing, man. And yeah, the intro is so fucking good because it's got that gray skull picture. It also does show like the sorceress in like a
Yeah,
very dynamic shot where it's like over her shoulder and it's like her looking up at the sky, you know.
yeah,
So you know, it's just the choice of the shot right there is very exciting and dramatic because it's not just like showing her face or like it could have been really corny and just kind of like faded her onto the screen and then faded her out.
right, right,
That
right.
would be like some real B movie or like 80s movie cheese, but over her shoulder and looking up. And yeah, and then the score, of course, like you've said it to me before, that like when it comes in, it's just like Superman the movie where it's like, you
Yeah,
know, the names are flying up at
right,
you
right.
and then yeah,
I love it.
oh yeah, yeah, it gets you pumped. But that brings up the thing I wanted to ask you too, which is like, when did you first see this movie and how old were you?
I um I guess I was right when it came out. I mean, my dad has great memories of this movie because like I have a He-Man tattoo. I have He-Man's sword from the cartoon tattooed on my wrist. And when I showed it to my dad, he was like, "Oh, you loved that when you were a baby." I see, because I was born in 1983. I was born the same month the cartoon came out, September 1983. So like the cartoon was around, but this movie really more than anything is
Mm-hmm.
the thing about He-Man I like the most, which probably
Mm-hmm.
makes me unique to like older He-Man fans that are like, "That's your favorite thing." I watched it every day. I mean, according to my parents, I watched it every day. Like they had it on VHS, and every day I'd be like, "Put on He-Man," and they'd put on He-Man. Like this is before I went to school. Like
Right,
not before school in the morning. Like before I was old enough to go to school. Like I was a baby,
right.
and who knows? Like it's so funny. Like who knows what I was getting from it? Like you know what I mean? Like, but I
Yeah.
must have just loved watching He-Man running around hitting people and stuff. And I watched it every day when I was like 4 or 5 years old. Um, and yeah, I it's such an early move. It's so early. It's so fundamental.
Yeah.
But you, what's your history with the film?
Yeah, I'm just 1 year older than you, and I don't think I saw it in the theater. I think that like my parents got it on VHS. There's quite a few movies from my childhood where my first exposure to them is seeing them on VHS,
Sure,
right?
yeah, me too.
And then there's movies that like I would watch over and over and over again. It's like, okay, well, okay, that makes sense why you're the person you are. Like I think I just watched like Return of the
Yeah,
Jedi like over and over and over again, right? Or I watched the Transformers the movie over and over and over again.
yeah, yeah,
This
yeah.
one I watched too, and it's funny because I used to watch the He-Man cartoon as a kid, um, but this movie stands out, and I always remember like I think my mom had this reaction. I know I as a kid had this reaction, but it was like, whoa, this is like way darker and scarier than the cartoon, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Skeletor goes from like, hey, everybody, I'm Skeletor, to like the fucking devil. Like he's like the Skeletor in this is like half Palpatine, half like Skeletor from the cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's a and again that's a really great choice in terms of design, in terms of writing, in terms of performance. Like Skeletor in the cartoon was like he was moving and doing stuff and fighting He-Man. Like in this, he's like regal. He's like
Mm-hmm.
he you were talking before about his entrance. His entrance is so good. You hear his staff like clung clung hitting the marble floors of the throne room, and we hear this theme that's the Skeletor theme, and we see his back, and he both He-Man and Skeletor in this get capes, which I think is a good design choice. And
Agree.
he's like got these like silver. He actually does look a little bit like Ming from
Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon, yeah. And Frank Langella. Frank, see, this is one of these. I would put this in bed with like Gene Hackman in
Hmm.
Superman, and even like I
Yeah.
would put this may be a weird comparison, Jim Carrey and Sonic, of like you get a really, really good actor to play a bad guy in a kind of silly movie, and they just fucking go for it 100%.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's so funny you said that you would put this in bed with it, and I just pictured Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor in bed with this
Yeah,
Skeletor, and I pictured Skeletor. You know when he comes out of the water at the end of the
yeah,
movie,
yeah,
like, and he's like, "I'll be back." Just
yeah.
pictured him like in bed. And that's him poking up in the covers, looking up at Gene Hackman. I don't know where my mind's going this morning, but
I don't
no,
know who would be
like,
the top and who'd be the bottom in that situation. They're both so powerful.
oh yes, yeah. I think like Gene Hackman's Lex would be the like the bottom, but he'd be like very disinterest. You know, he just would be like whatever. Anyway, I don't even know where I'm going with this, but like this movie, when people talk about this movie, they mainly talk about like the budget and how like it's cheesy, and they do talk about how like it came out too late, like you said before. But I think the main thing they talk about with this movie is Frank Langella's Skeletor
Yes.
performance. You know, and you know, it's so funny that like we're kind of deep into this review, and like this is when we first start talking about it, but like it is like kind of transcendent for this movie. Like his performance makes this movie way better than it needs to be.
Yes, I agree. He does a way better job than he needed to do. I mean, he does way more than a serviceable job. He like really is going for it. And like see like his version of Skeletor I think is the one that means most to me. And I think
Hmm.
if you look at like Kevin Smith's Skeletor in his animated series on Netflix now, I feel
Yeah.
like he's getting a lot from this movie. There's a lot of references of to this movie in the Kevin Smith show, like Wildor's in it now and Blade and stuff like that. The line "Let
Right.
this be our final battle," and I feel like to me that the mythos of this Skeletor, because this Skeletor you get the feeling is like he's more like Darth Vader. He doesn't get
Hmm.
his hands dirty himself. He well, first of all, he has like stormtroopers. Like it's not just in the cartoon. There's a band of good guys and a band of bad guys, but in this, there are Skeletor has stormtroopers, and
Yep.
then we don't see it a lot. But there's an Eternian army too.
Hmm.
You see some of
Hmm.
them captured. So like there's more of a Star Wars element, and there's also laser guns, which you don't see that much in the cartoon. Um, but yeah, this Skeletor, you get the, and also like his relationship to Evelyn seems very intimate and sexual in this.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but also like, he's like menacing in this very subtle way. Like he raises his voice a few times. Like the
Hmm.
very first thing he says is no, and he turns around and it's like this great opening. But then like he's very like sort of like sarcastic and sardonic and sort of
Hmm.
like the way he like he's got the staff, the way he like wraps his fingers around the staff slowly. There's something like I don't know what not chameleon like lizard like about the way he moves and the way he moves his hand. Even like when there's close-ups of him, he's always darting his eyes around in a really
Hmm.
interesting way. He's just doing so many interesting choices as Skeletor, which is good
Yes.
because the actor playing He-Man's not a great actor, and one of them has to be doing a great job.
Yep. Yep. You know, it's so funny because like the most iconic fantasy and sci-fi movies, if there's like makeup involved or costumes involved, the villain or like the interesting character in those movies, the actor has figured out how to take what they're physically wearing
Yeah,
and use it to define how the character moves and how they talk and stuff. You know, like you mentioned you talked a lot about like how he moves and his face and stuff, and that's so important because he's always like sneering, like he's
yes,
always kind of sneering when he's talking, and then his eyes are always looking around, like you said. That's a really important part, which like that just a way an actor moves their eyes really enforces how you feel in the moment, right? If
yes,
he's
yeah,
just like
yeah,
if he's just kind of staring forward like deadpan, it makes it feel one thing. But if he's always looking around like that, it's always like,
yeah,
oh, he's clever, or he's always thinking about things, or he has these like dark thoughts, right?
right,
Um, and then it's like the combination, and it's so funny to like to heavily analyze this like character that's based on a fucking plastic toy, but
right,
Frank Langella took it to that degree. You know what I'm
yes,
saying? because when you combine his like darting eyes, like you said, with his sort of like smug, like his voice is like smug and deep for the most part.
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
he has this sort of like rattling kind of scream when he gets upset,
Right.
and it's just so good on so many different levels. Like recently for the Lassercast, we watched all the Planet of the Apes movies, like the classic
Yeah.
ones from the 60s and 70s. And you could tell like Roddy McDowall, who becomes like the Andy Serkis of that franchise,
Yeah.
um, that he knows how to move like an ape and move his eyes and his mask, and you can manipulate the mask. It's the same thing that Frank Langella does. It's like he manipulates the mask in such a way that it feels organic. It feels like, oh, there's this fucking bone dude right here. It's
Yeah.
not just Frank Langella in a mask, The one thing that always kind of strikes me as super interesting is that like he's got a thing over his nose
Yeah.
that like it's not like I'm trying to think. There was something. Okay. Yeah, we reviewed Fallout on Comic Books Transformed, and the one of the characters, the Ghoul, like has
Yeah.
no nose, right? It's like a Voldemort thing.
Yeah.
Like Skeletor in the comics and cartoons and stuff, he has no nose because he's fucking skeleton face,
Yeah.
right? But in this, Franklin Langella has a nose, but they tried to make it look like he
Right.
doesn't. But even that, he uses to his advantage and his effect.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, he's so good. The way, like, because I know I'm kind of rambling. I'm talking so much, but like, just what he chooses to say in an aggressive way, what he chooses to say in a sort of like, oh, I don't care, like you mean nothing to me kind of way. It's like every fucking scene with him, every scene is great.
Yeah. He's scary. He's very
Yes,
scary for young kids.
yeah,
He's terrifying. Um, you said before you want to talk about the mercenaries. Let's talk about the mercenaries because at one point, so we don't have to go through the narrative, but He-Man and his friends go through it. By the way, the portal is such a cool design too. They go through a portal to Earth, 1987 Earth. They meet Courtney Cox and her boyfriend, Julie and Kevin. I think they're good. They do a good job, these kids. I think it was smart to give them something that they're going through, which is they're breaking up because her parents died and she feels guilt over her parents dying and all that. And the Skeletor he has one key, but he wants both keys. So he's tracking them from Eternia. So he says, before we go in with our troops, let's send like an advanced guard. And it's very much like the scene in Empire Strikes Back with the what do you call it? The bounty hunters. But this is interesting because I like these characters, but I feel like this was an opportunity to put more of the recognizable characters in. My guess is that Mattel told them no, do new characters because those will be new toys, right? The only one of those that is original is Beastman,
right.
but it could have been Stinkor or any. You could have been all of those people, but it ends up being Bleed, who's like a human with like a bald head and he has like two katanas. Sarad, who's kind of like he looks like he's a lizard person but with like armor on.
Yep,
Beastman, but this Beastman doesn't speak and he has his hair like in a samurai like bun.
yep,
Karg, who's the weirdest looking. Karg kind of looks like he's a monster, but he's got like kind of like a monkeyish face, but also like an 80s perm, like a big hair. It's very
yes,
weird
yes,
looking. And he does a lot of the talking for some reason.
yep, yep.
Do you remember this is a random memory for me. The
Right.
Sarad toy.
No, I don't. What's
Uh,
the deal with that?
all right, so the Sarad toy, you would never do this now, by the way, because it's so dangerous. But inside of it, it had a flint, basically like a cigarette lighter. Like like you scratch the wheel and it makes a spark. You would do that, and then sparks would shoot out of Sarad's mouth, and I could still smell the smoke
Sure,
from that
sure.
toy. I remember getting it and opening it. Like for some reason, I have like the most distinct memory of getting that toy. We must have
Yes.
been. We were in a car. We must have been going somewhere
Yeah.
for the family or whatever, and they were like, "Let's just get Mike a figure so he could shut the fuck up and not have to deal with him." Because I just remember we're in a car, we're someplace different. They give me this toy, I open it, and I'm like making the sparks come out of its mouth endlessly.
You probably got it off from the Toys R Us that was off Highland
Ugh.
Boulevard by New Dorp, right?
No, when I was a kid, I lived in Brooklyn, so my Toys R Us was on Belt Parkway in Brooklyn. Now it's a, what is it now? I think now it's a Target.
Target. I was gonna say, yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, so like with that whole sequence, right? First of all, Karg, I fucking love Karg so much. He kind of looks like he looks like a critter from like the movie Critters, but
Oh yeah, it
like
does.
tall.
An
Like he looks
evolved
like
critter.
yeah, he looks like a crit. Like if they did like a Jeff Goldblum thing where they took like a fly and Jeff Goldblum, it's like you took a critter and my aunt and you put them together. That would be Karg, right? And instead of having the black critter hair, they have like this white perm. He's great though. His acting's great. I think that the guy that played Karg was on like an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where he played
Really?
like a coke fiend or something like that. But that scene is 1000%. They're just like, let's just do that scene from Empire Strikes Back. It's
Yes.
exactly that. The only difference is that, like, in the Empire Strikes Back scene, Darth Vader's given the orders, and in this, Skeletor's given the orders, but they make sure that like Evelyn announces who each person is. They're like Blade,
Yeah.
Karg, and it's supposed to be this intimidating thing. Um, you mentioned how like they could have had some of the regular guys on there. I think like obviously Trapjaw would have been one of the
Yes.
people, right? And then is the fucking lizard guy? Is his name just literally Lizard Man? I can't remember.
I
The
can't
one,
remember either.
yeah. There's the one with like the tail, and I think he's got like a kind of like a boulder where his hand would be. Like I think it
Mm.
would be like that guy and Trapjaw and Beastman, and I don't know, like the Cyclops guy, right? Like
Yeah,
it'd be
yeah.
those guys. But I just remember when those mercenaries do show up, they beat the shit out of that one guy that you mentioned before.
Yes.
And then at one point, Kevin is by himself and they jump him. And it's so funny, like he just yells, "Get out of here!"
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
the look on his face, he looks so scared when they show up. It's really funny,
Yeah.
It's
I
good
mean, it's
acting right there.
ridiculous. From their point of view, this is crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They burn
That
their school down.
right.
And that scene, I think, is pretty well put together and menacing, where like they're going after Courtney Cox and she's crawling under the stage, and Blade is like putting the swords down in between the boards, and like she's going around them, and then she throws like some bleach or ammonia in Beastman's
Beastman.
face.
Yeah.
They burn the whole fucking school down.
Yeah, no, it's like totally menacing. Like when they show up and it's violent. There's blood on
Yeah.
Kevin's face after he fights them. And then one thing that I'll always remember, because there's certain things that like you just always remember as a kid. I'll always remember when he has that collar on his neck,
Yes.
when Evelyn puts the collar on his neck, because it changes his voice and his demeanor and stuff like immediately once he gets the collar on, right?
Yeah.
He's just like very monotone like in his voice, but then it's like synthesized and he just has like no control whatsoever, and that just kind of always stuck in my mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Again, that's a great example of like the mixing of the mundane and the fantastic, right? They're in her house, the table is knocked over. They put this like thing on his neck that makes him talk in this like a mechanized way. It's like it's sort of like a it's like a lasso of truth, but it's like sci-fi. And then
Right.
Evelyn has this sort of like portable hologram projector that she shows him the key on. So like this stuff really works well. And I think one of the reasons why it works well is because it's 1980s 35 millimeter film lighting. So it's got that like really rich darks and shadows and lighting that it makes the whole world seems kind of interesting.
Yes.
We've already gone an hour. You and I could go all day talking about Master Universe. So I guess before we do wrap up, I want to talk about some of these other performances.
Of course.
God, there's so many good ones. Let's Billy Barty as Gwildor. Again, I think just like Frank Langella, I think he's holding up more than his end to make the movie interesting. Like he's doing a lot, and they give him a lot of important lines. They give him a lot of like when Kevin's like, "Oh, I'm just a nobody," and he's like, "Oh, everybody is important," or whatever he says. Like, like
Yeah,
he's like such a good actor, and he's like the heart of the movie.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, he says something like there's only one of you anywhere. He says something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's funny too. I mean, all the kind of comic relief moments are like essentially Gwildor moments, right? Is where he's talking to the cow. He thinks
Yeah.
the cows are like the sentient beings on the planet. He's got at one point he's wearing like sunglasses and like a woman's hat and like a boa and stuff,
So
right?
80s. You have to do that in
Yeah,
the 80s.
yeah. When he shows up, he's like face down in the water, like when they land on Earth,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he's like
yeah.
kind of almost drowning, and then like water comes out of his ears,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
When
yeah.
yeah. But I always think about him from like Willow because he's like the elder guy in Willow, right? Like the
Uh-huh.
right. He kind of always plays this kind of like wily character that's also wise, like almost like a Yoda type character, and that's what he is in this too. Like
Is
he's
he
like
in Legend
silly.
too, or am I
Uh,
misremembering?
honestly, I've actually never seen Legend, so I couldn't tell you. He probably is.
There's a lot of little people in that movie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, is he in like the fucking Wizard of Oz?
I don't know if he's that old. Billy. Yes, he is in Legend. He is in Legend. He plays Screwball in
Okay,
Legend.
Screwball. Okay, there you
No,
go.
he's not in the Wizard of Oz, but he's in Over the Rainbow, which is a movie about
Oh,
the Wizard of Oz.
yeah, that fucking weird ass movie. Yeah, 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 yeah. So
That
I
movie that's
mean,
just racist against little people.
right, 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 right.
Did you watch? Did you watch the cursed films on that on Wizard of
Yes,
Oz? Is that where you?
yes. That's
Yeah, that's where.
fantastic.
Yeah, that's where I learned about that movie because that movie like does not exist anywhere. You like can't find that movie.
Right. Yeah, yeah. You kind of see like scenes from it and you feel kind of dirty watching it, you know? But but just like he's so good. If we want to talk about performances, we've already mentioned Frank Langella. I really think we need to talk about Evelyn and
Yes,
Meg
Meg Foster.
Foster. So one of the funny things when I was doing a little bit of research was they actually wanted her to wear contacts because they felt like her eyes were not like the Evelyn character's eyes in the cartoon. And it's just like, holy shit, are you shooting yourself in the foot?
Like that's
If
the
you
reason you hire her is because of her crazy eyes.
Her eyes are fucking insane.
Yeah.
And you were talking about like the lighting and the way that this film looks on the film it's shot. Like one thing they do really well in this movie is like accentuate her fucking amazing eyes. You
Yes.
know?
Yeah, absolutely. And her design is really cool. I like the
Yep.
design. And again, like her, she plays her as very sexual and sensual and having like a sexual power. Like she really is like, I'm beautiful and I can be a trickster because of my beauty. And I think
Right.
her performance of Evelyn absolutely affects the way Evelyn is going forward in like the Kevin Smith show, and even like the way what's her name plays her in the Kevin Smith show, the one from Game of
Lena
Thrones.
Headey.
Yeah, like and the idea that her and Skeletor have a relationship. Yeah, like she is Evelyn
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this movie like does things. It like raises up, it elevates the source material, right? Because if we
Yes.
look back at these cartoons and stuff, like you look back at the original Transformers, you look back at the original He-Man, and through nostalgia, you're like, it was amazing. These characters are so iconic, but they're not as good as you remember. It's like the stuff that comes later that's based off of it.
Yeah.
That it's the movies really, because they become more serious, more dynamic. There's this thing when they're making the movie that they feel like, oh, this has to be more complicated, or these characters have to have
Yeah.
more depth, right? One thing I know we're talking about characters, but one thing I did not mention that I really want to mention is the screenwriter. Uh, he also worked on other things too. He worked on the Muppet Show. He worked on the Dark Crystal. He wrote the Dark
Oh,
Crystal.
okay.
David Odell wrote the
Yeah.
Dark Crystal. Um, so like he has this experience working with this sort of like prop stuff, this fantasy stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think that like you have to take the source material and make it in something more complex. Just a side note, and we've talked about Superman a lot. David Odell, who wrote Masters of the Universe, also wrote the 1984 Supergirl movie too.
Oh, he did.
Yes.
Interesting. Well,
Which once again, that's another movie where it's like there's this fantasy setting, this
yeah,
space
yeah, yeah.
setting, and then it's like suburban small town setting
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that about him.
But
Well,
is there any other performances that you wanted to talk about too?
there's a lot of good ones. Tila is played by Chelsea Field. I always, when I was a young, like had a thing for her. Like I think she's really good. She plays Tila as very, very brassy and tough, which I loved. Especially because like an early draft had Shira in it, and I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of what was going to be Shira's role was given to the Tila character.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
you've got this actor John Cypher as Man at Arms. He's taking it very seriously. He's really doing it. Probably the other big one is James Tolkien as Detective Lubick.
Oh my God,
We know
yeah.
him as the principal from Back to the Future. He is he's playing it so heavy, but it's also comedic, especially like when he starts to like get involved. Like I've said this before on the show. Like one of my favorite lines is when they shoot a laser at him, and he's like, "Oh, no one takes pot shots at Lubick," and he starts shooting at the monsters with like a fucking
A
shotgun.
shotgun. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then at the end, he wants to stay an attorney. He like found an attorney and like girlfriend, and he wants to just live there.
Yes.
He adds so much to the human shit.
Yeah. It's so funny. Yeah, she looks like a young Sharon Stone and she's just immediately in love with him. Like he's sitting
Right.
on a throne. He looks like a Roman emperor and she's just like looking down at him adoringly. You know, it's so funny that the guy that plays Man at Arms, his name is like John Cypher, where I feel like Lubick is the Cypher character for the audience, where he's
Yeah.
just kind of constantly like, what is this shit? This is crazy. This is nuts.
This
You
is
know,
fucking Twilight Zone.
right,
Like
right, right. He,
a
he makes all
lot
those
of
kind of
that's a
comments.
lot of lines like that. Or like he
Yeah, yeah,
calls them cultists or
right.
hippies. At one point he's got the cosmic key and he's like, "Do you think this could be Russian?"
Right, right. Yeah. So he basically kind of represents like what a person from our time would be thinking during all this nonsense. And I mean, he's just such a fun actor. Whenever he's on screen in anything, he always gets everyone's attention. So it's just like you have Frank Langella, you have Meg Foster, you have him, you have Billy Barty, like all these people in this movie are fucking great, and
Yeah.
then like the teenagers who they're really the characters that actually have arcs in this movie.
Yeah.
Like I guess Skeletor kind of has an arc. He-Man absolutely does not have an arc.
No.
But like the two people that actually do have arcs, I mean, especially Courtney Cox has the arc in the movie, right?
Yeah.
But it's like they're the young, nobody knows them actors, and it's Courtney Cox, right? And then
Yeah.
the guy who plays her boyfriend, that's Barry Livingston, and he's fucking like he's from like Star Trek Voyager and
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
so like there's just a lot of fucking talent on this movie.
You know what's funny about Courtney Cox is she's not like my favorite actress. I mean, I think she's
Mm-mm.
very good, but just somehow in my life, she's been in three of my favorite movies. Like when I was a kid, this was my favorite movie. When I was like 13 or whatever, like my favorite movie was Ace Ventura. And
Yep.
then when I got older, my favorite movie was Scream.
Scream.
And
There
she's
you
in
go.
that. Like she's made it in so many of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
But no, she's so cute in this. You feel for her again. Like she's, if she wasn't good, a lot of it would fall apart. Like a lot of these performances, if they weren't in place, this stuff wouldn't work. Her
Right.
like fear and her heartbreak like makes it all sort of work. And
Yep.
I still at the end like get moved when like they go back in time and her parents are alive and she meets up with Kevin in the street and they're like it's like this great happy ending and then
Yeah.
that little like marble that they
Yeah.
got from the sorceress. The sorceress, by the way, played her mother in Friends. The woman who played the sorceress played her Ross and Monica's mom in Friends. What's her name?
Christina Pickles.
Yeah, Christina Pickles. Great name.
Yeah, yeah. Man, that's a cool little bit of trivia right there. That's interesting. No, I mean like there's certain things in this movie that when you watch it over and over again as a kid, it just kind of sticks with you. There's the mercenaries beating the shit out of the boyfriend and attacking
Mhm.
her in the school. There's when Skeletor first makes his entrance. There's one thing we got to mention is that like Skeletor like addresses everyone in Eternia by
Yes.
like being projected super high. It's super
Yeah,
epic.
yeah,
There's this
yeah.
one fucking shot where it's like his projected face and He-Man's looking up and
That's how
like straight
He-Man's
out of
introduced.
yeah.
It's
Um
great.
yeah, it's like straight out of a comic book. Then there's the part where Evil Lynn pretends to be Courtney Cox's mom.
Which
That part
is
always
so
kind of
fucked
sticks.
up.
Yeah,
It's so but what's funny is even as like a 4-year-old, I saw it coming a mile away. Like
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But it's
yeah,
so funny that
yeah.
like the thing the gamut she plays is that they're like spies. She's like, we're doing some very important work, so we had to run away. Cody Cox
Yeah,
is like,
yeah.
sure, okay. And
You
then
have
the
to
mom's
fake
like,
our
"We really
deaths.
need the key," and she's like, "Sure, no problem. I'll get you that
Yeah.
key."
I'll go steal this from Gwildor. Yeah, yeah.
We haven't
Yeah, that, I
talked.
mean that
Yeah,
go ahead.
one of just one of those things for me is He-Man flying around on the disc. That's I think a really cool scene, and
Yes.
then that culminates in the top of the roof where like there's like 100 stormtroopers and He-Man like beats the shit out of like a good 25 of them. Like He-Man's like they've got both of his arms and he kind of like pulls up and
Right.
like they kind of fly away. Like
Right.
the physical Dolph Lundgren got the physicality really well. Like you felt like that was the He-Man you knew. Like when he knocks over the big statue,
Mm-hmm.
like that's the He-Man you know who's just like pure physical power.
Strength, yeah. Power, yeah.
Or the very very erotic scene where Blade is whipping He-Man and it looks
Yeah.
like Skeletor's like coming while he's watching it.
Oh my God. Yes.
All
Yeah.
of these things stand out.
I know. Just think about all this shit that we've listed from this movie that often gets talked about as like a bad movie or talked
Right.
about as a joke. It's so fucking good. One other thing we should point out is that the guy who plays Blade, right? The one that's whipping He-Man, that guy was like the sword expert on the movie.
Oh
Like he
yeah,
was one of the
yeah.
stunt men, you know. His name was Anthony DeLongis, right?
Mhm.
And they end up making this character for him to play. And I think he does a great
Yeah.
job.
And even in the writing, like there's a one line that implies so much where he goes to fight He-Man and he's like, "I've waited a long time for this," and you
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like, "Ooh, what's the history between Blade and He-Man? That like
yeah.
there's some beef there."
Yeah, yeah. I
Well,
don't
we would,
think he
yeah,
dies either, right? At the end, like all the
no,
mercenaries get away. The only one that gets killed is that's another thing that you remember from this movie is that Skeletor gets mad and he kills
Srod,
Saurod.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like you were saying before, like, and we've said this before when we've talked about He-Man because we've recorded about He-Man a lot, and we've recorded about Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles.
Fuck yeah.
A lot of these things that people love as kids, if they don't go away, they actually get better. There are
Yes.
some like weird gatekeepy neckbeard guys that are like, I don't like this new thing. And to me, that's always so counterintuitive because the thing will fade away and die if it doesn't get reinvented. And the cool thing that happens with this stuff is a younger audience who liked it as kids reinvent it. I've said this before about Master Universe. I think it's only gotten better. It got better and better and better and better and better. And to me, the best entry in the whole franchise is She-Ra Princesses of Power.
Fuck yeah.
Um, and this is a step towards that. Like
Hmm.
it could have died with the cartoon. This movie, as much as people saw it as a failure, I think is a big leap towards it getting better. And a lot of like what's in current Master Universe stuff and She-Ra stuff, I think comes from this movie. I mean, I'd have to go back and watch a lot of it, but there's stuff from Master Universe movie that's homage in She-Ra Princesses of Power.
Mm. Okay.
Particularly, I remember one Hordak talking to all of Etheria like the way Skeletor does with that big projection. I remember when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's straight out of the Master Universe movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And now, supposedly, Amazon is making a live action She-Ra show.
What? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm down with that. And you know, since this movie came out, there's been a Masters of the Universe film in development hell since like
Yeah.
the 80s. And but now
Right.
they're like, oh, we cast somebody. Like, I'll believe it when I
Yeah.
see it. But
Yeah.
supposedly it's supposed to be happening. But whatever, like I'm for it. It just only gets better.
Yes, totally agreed. I always think about this movie the way I think about my favorite movie of all time, which is The Transformers, the movie. And it's just like things are darker, they're more intense, they're better than they are in the actual cartoon. It's all about toys and like just trying to make money off of toys, but somehow through all that greed, something fun and imaginative is created.
Well,
And
yeah, I
Good.
always resist when people say, "Oh, well, it's just a toy or whatever." It's like, there was a time in history where the church ran everything. So all the great artists were employed by the church. So they did illustrations of biblical stories. Like the person who has the money is the person who dictates stuff, but the people that are hired, the artists and artisans that are hired, they put into it true artistry. You know what
Yes.
I mean? So who cares if that's the way it started?
Yes. Yeah. I'm so glad that like at this point we were able to talk about Masters of the Universe and bring it to like Renaissance painting. You
Of
know,
course,
that's what
of
we
course.
do on your show, man. Yeah, I fucking love it.
This movie, by the way, one of the first talk about ahead of its time. It has a post credit stinger, which every movie has now. And this was like this and Ferris Bueller are the earliest ones that I remember. And
Hmm.
it's such a it was such a tease that never came. Skeletor pops his head out. Well, Skeletor dies exactly like Palpatine, and he
He
pops his
does.
head out. He's like, "I'll be back," and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
promise was never fulfilled.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because they were going to make a sequel to this,
Yeah.
and they even went so far as to make sets and costumes, and then they used some of that stuff for the movie Cyborg.
Yes. 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 I've
Yeah,
heard. I've seen that. Yeah. Yeah. They thought this was going to be a big hit, and I think it just came out the wrong time, man. I don't know. Who knows? It's such a crapshoot. You know what I mean? Like there's so many great movies in history that were not successes when they came out, and
right,
movies that are successes that no one gives a shit about, like
right,
fucking Avatar.
right. Wow, that is like the best example right there. Holy shit.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Well, Pete, thank you so much for being here. We can
yeah,
talk for another 5 hours about this movie, but I
easily.
feel like we've given a good episode.
Yes.
Um, what's going on your channels? What's going? Oh, wait, I should say that you and I on Comic Books Transformed have been covering this season, season one (parentheses not really) of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
What else is going on in your world?
Yeah, it's funny you said we gave a good episode. That's what you've been doing on my channel, man. You've been giving good episodes on Doctor Who, and I'm actually really excited to talk about this next episode of Doctor Who with you because I feel like they're taking pot shots at me and stuff in this next episode.
Is it about
Um,
a bunch of middle-aged white guys doing podcasts?
it's close. It's close. There's definitely like a YouTuber vibe. It's not there's not middle-aged men though, luckily. No. Okay, so I have two shows, Comic Books Transformed and the Lassercast. On Comic Books Transformed, we cover movies and streaming shows that have been adapted from comic books. We just finished reviewing Fallout, which is this really great show on Amazon Prime based on a video game. And we're going to move on to The Acolyte, which is a Star Wars
Ooh.
live action show set in the High Republic time, which you and I have covered on my
Can I
channel
ask
before
you
too.
what are your going into that, right? What are
Yeah.
your expectations? What do you think? Do you think it's going to be good? Do you think it's going to be bad? Do you not know?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be bad. But that's not just to be like I'm a cynical middle-aged white dude. It's like um
It looks bad. It
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
look good. I'm
right.
hoping that it's another Andor where I didn't care about it and then it blew me away.
Yeah,
But it looks like it's probably going to be more like another
Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan.
Right. And that's what I'm expecting. Brian and I have been like very fortunate because like the last three or four things that we've covered, we've actually really enjoyed, like X-Men 97 and Fallout. And then there was something before that that we really loved too. But yeah, we think this one's gonna be kind of rough to watch. But we'll make some fun. We'll have some fun times talking about it. On over on the Lassercast, Danny and
Mhm.
I have been covering basically apes and vampires for a couple of weeks now. We've been reviewing the Interview with the Vampire TV show, which is fucking amazing.
Okay.
Uh, Danny and I have been covering that, and then we covered every single Planet of the Apes movie that's ever been made. Like Danny's covered them all. So, if you like any of that stuff, come on over to the Lassercast too.
All right. We end every episode by saying go bye bye. Can you say go bye bye like Skeletor?
Oh, I was gonna say when you
good,
told me to say go bye bye, I was gonna say good journey,
good journey.
but no.
You can end
I'll
by
say it
saying
like
good journey.
yeah. But this time I'll say it like Skeletor. I like that challenge though. You'd be like, go bye bye.